Hello, everyone. People often say, you can't judge a book by its cover, and that statement couldn't be more true. Some people may appear rough on the outside but have hearts full of kindness. Some seem cold and distant, but secretly show warmth to the world around them. And then, there are those who wear a flawless exterior while harboring a heart full of darkness and evil. Today, we will talk about the murderer, Wade Wilson. Strangely, when he was arrested and put on trial, not only did some women refrain from condemning him, but they even praised his good looks, calling him charming, and became his obsessed fans. Thousands of letters, accompanied by provocative photos, were sent to express admiration and plead for a reduced sentence. What exactly happened that year? This was a case that shook the entire United States. On October 7, 2019, the Coral Cape Police Department received an emergency call. The caller, a man in a state of panic, reported that a lunatic had barged into his print shop, screaming that he had just killed someone and needed to buy a train ticket to escape. At first, the shop owner thought it was a joke, but when he saw the man's clothes soaked in blood, he realized it was terrifyingly real. By the time the police arrived, the suspect had already fled, leaving behind a black car. The front of the vehicle had visible dents and scratches. When officers opened the door to inspect, they were shocked to find the passenger seat covered in blood. Preliminary investigations revealed that the vehicle was registered to Kristen Melton. While one team attempted to contact the car's owner, another rushed to Melton's apartment for a welfare check. Upon entering the home, officers were horrified by the gruesome scene before them. Right outside the bedroom lay the body of a woman, her face disfigured, a large bruise on her neck, and broken fingernails all soaked in a pool of blood. The corpse was tightly wrapped in clothes and bed sheets. After forensic examination, authorities confirmed the victim was Kristen Melton, born in 1984. She lived a happy single life with her family in Illinois before moving to Coral Cape a few years ago. There, she worked as a waitress at a local restaurant. Outside of work, she helped her cousin care for their child and looked after her mother, who suffered from Alzheimer's. Melton's brother described her as the backbone of the family, always strong and never complaining despite life's hardships. Moreover, she had a good relationship with everyone and never had conflicts with anyone. However, the wounds on her body indicated that despite her efforts to fight back, she had been brutally assaulted before her death. What exactly happened to Melton? The first clue about the suspect. As confusion loomed, Melton's best friend, Cyrus, recounted that on the night before the murder, around 10 p.m., she and Melton went to a bar in Milesburg to unwind after work. There, they met a tall, handsome man who approached them and introduced himself as JR, a 25-year-old. He stood out not only with his short hair, fair skin, large eyes, thick eyebrows, and charming dimples, but also with tattoos on his neck and arms. Standing over 6'3", with a muscular build, JR seemed like the ideal boyfriend, good-looking, humorous, and charismatic. Both women were excited to meet such an intriguing man, and Melton, in particular, felt as if she had met the man of her dreams. Accompanying JR was a man named Jason, who was equally humorous. When the bar closed at 2 a.m., the group wasn't ready to part ways, so they decided to continue their night at Jason's house. As soon as they entered the bedroom, Melton and JR immediately got intimate, while Jason and Cyrus stepped outside to chat, not wanting to intrude. Time flew by, and about an hour later, Jason's family, unable to tolerate the noise, angrily came out and scolded them. JR then drove the two women to Melton's apartment in Coral Cape. At 6 a.m., Cyrus had to leave early to take her child to school. Before leaving, she and Melton made plans to have dinner together later that day. No one could have predicted that would be the last time they ever saw each other. Based on Cyrus's description, police quickly identified the man who stormed into the print shop as JR. They suspected he was likely Melton's killer. However, at 8:50 a.m. on October 7th, another emergency call came in. At a central parking lot in Milesburg, a couple was engaged in a violent altercation. The man was not only beating the woman, but also attempting to drag her into a car. By the time police arrived, he had already fled. The assaulted woman, Melissa, told officers that the night before, she and her boyfriend had gone drinking at a bar. He had brought along a friend and tried persuading her to sleep over at that friend's house, but she refused. Enraged, he abandoned her at the bar and drove her car elsewhere. The next morning, he showed up at her workplace, assaulted her, and even tried strangling her. After struggling for a while, she managed to escape. At 3 p.m., police discovered Melissa's boyfriend, shirtless, lounging inside her car. When asked to surrender the keys and step out, he suddenly sped away. The man had fair skin, large eyes, a muscular build, and tattoos, matching JR's description perfectly. More importantly, he had previously brought friends to the same bar, where Melton met JR and was known for his violent, aggressive nature. After further investigation, police identified him as Wade Wilson, a 25-year-old man. Wade was born on May 20th, 1994, in Milesburg, Florida, under unusual circumstances. His parents were both teenagers, unable to raise him properly. His mother suffered from mental illness and substance abuse, forcing his father to send him to a wealthier foster family. However, unlike tragic stories of mistreated foster children, Wade grew up in the loving care of the Wilsons, who treated him like their own son and regularly participated in church activities. During childhood, Wade was described as cheerful, energetic, athletic, and academically excellent. But upon entering high school, he changed drastically, becoming withdrawn, antisocial, and prone to fighting. Worse, he spiraled into drug addiction. His classmates whispered behind his back, calling him a psycho who fought anyone he encountered. The Wilsons, worried about his lack of control, sent him to rehab centers and psychiatric hospitals, but nothing worked. At 18, Wade began reconnecting with his biological parents, frequently asking them for money. His father, burdened with guilt for abandoning him, gave him large sums of cash each time, only enabling his reckless behavior further. He accumulated an extensive criminal record, frequently getting into trouble with the law. In November 2013, he was arrested for theft and served time until September 2014. In 2015, he was arrested again on charges of kidnapping and sexual assault. Though he pleaded not guilty, the lack of evidence led to his acquittal. 3 years later, Wade was implicated in the murder case of Dennis, where Dennis was accused of conspiring to kill her husband, while Wade was charged with fabricating evidence. On February 19, 2019, Wade's ex-girlfriend accused him of stealing her laptop and phone, kidnapping her, and sexually assaulting her. The court issued a restraining order against him. However, on July 1, 2019, he was arrested again for assault and multiple other charges, including drug trafficking and human trafficking. With such an extensive criminal record, Wade quickly became the prime suspect in Melton's case. What was even more remarkable was that Wade was still on probation at the time of Melton's murder. When the police arrived to interrogate him, they discovered he had fled. As law enforcement scoured the city for him, at 10:30 p.m. that same day, Wade's biological father, Stephen, called the police. He revealed that Wade had confessed to murder over the phone. At first, Stephen did not believe his son's words, but after hearing him describe the details of the crime, he had no choice but to accept the truth. To prevent Wade from descending further into a life of crime, Stephen decided to report him. When Wade called again, Stephen put the phone on speaker so that the police could listen. In the conversation, Wade proudly recounted the 2 murders he had committed in a single day. On the morning of October 7, 2019, while Melton was still asleep, Wade strangled her to death. After killing her, he intended to dispose of her body, but because rigor mortis had already set in and her body wouldn't fit into the trunk of the car, he abandoned it and drove the victim's car to find Melissa to exact revenge for their argument the day before. After assaulting Melissa, his bloodlust still wasn't satisfied, so he continued driving around. At that moment, he spotted a middle-aged woman walking alone. Seeing that she was by herself, Wade hatched an evil plan. He pretended to ask for directions to lure her into his car. As soon as she sat down, Wade immediately strangled and brutally beat her. After some time, the woman passed out from the pain. Wade initially thought she was dead and planned to dump her body, but upon checking, He realized she was still alive. He continued torturing her for a while before running her over with his car more than 10 times. As he recounted these horrific acts, Wade shocked everyone with his complete lack of remorse. He was not only indifferent but even proud of his crimes. He then demanded that his father call a car to help him escape. Although Stephen initially hesitated, he ultimately decided to cooperate with the police. He pretended to agree, tricking Wade into revealing his location, and immediately provided the information to law enforcement. Wade was hiding in an abandoned house. When the police raided the location, they found him leisurely sitting in the living room, eating chicken feet and drinking alcohol, showing no fear or regret despite having taken 2 lives. After Wade was arrested, the police brought Melton's best friend Cyrus to identify him. She confirmed that Wade was the man who had appeared at the bar under the alias JR the night before. According to Wade's phone confession, he had killed 2 women in a single day. Besides Melton, the other victim was identified as Diana, a 43-year-old bartender. On the afternoon of October 7th, Diana's family reported her missing. Investigators found that she was a recently engaged single mother with 2 sons, aged 19 and 29. For 5 years, Diana had worked diligently at a local bar, was well-liked, and had never had any known conflicts with anyone. Around 10 a.m. on October 7, Diana was reported missing while on her way to Sam's pub. The time and location aligned with what Wade had described in his phone call to Stephen. After 3 days of searching, the police finally had a breakthrough. A vulture was seen circling over a field near Sam's store, raising suspicions. When authorities arrived, they were horrified to find a heavily decomposed body, unrecognizable. Through DNA testing and the identification of faded tattoos on the victim's back, police confirmed the body belonged to Diana. Surveillance footage from around the crime scene also showed Melton's car present during the crime. Further investigation revealed Diana's phone inside Melton's car, along with bloodstains on the car door. DNA tests later confirmed the blood belonged to Diana. On October 19, 2019, Wade was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder, violent assault, and theft. Despite being convicted and awaiting execution in prison, the story did not end there. While awaiting trial, Wade continued to cause trouble. In October 2020, Wade and a 34-year-old inmate named Joseph plotted an escape. He damaged a prison window and attempted to steal a car to flee, but the plan was foiled in time. By 2023, police found a gray bag near the prison containing 2 sealed packs of liquid tobacco, drugs, a lighter, and other illegal substances. A fellow inmate revealed that Bobby, 36, had smuggled these items into the prison and that Wade was the main distributor among other inmates. As a result of this crime, Wade's sentence was extended by an additional 12 years, and he was fined $50,000. However, these incidents were not the most controversial part of the case. After videos of Wade's trial were made public, many people were drawn to his appearance. His photos and short videos quickly went viral, garnering millions of views and attracting tens of thousands of followers. Some even nicknamed him the Deadpool Killer due to his name matching that of the famous Deadpool character. Shockingly, some netizens argued that the death penalty was unfair and that Wade did not deserve such a harsh sentence. Even more astonishing, Wade's fans organized a fundraising campaign to help Wade build a team of reputable, professional, and capable lawyers. Those who donated between $1 and $50 could enter a lottery for a chance to speak with Wade, while those who contributed over $1,000 would receive a shirt he had worn. Within just a few days, the campaign had attracted hundreds of participants, with some individuals willing to donate up to $24,000. The total amount raised after the campaign reached $72,358. Over 5 years of awaiting trial, Wade received nearly 4,000 letters from fans, including numerous provocative photos. Among them, 163 images were deemed too explicit and were rejected by prison authorities. His fans even wrote letters to the judge, pleading for his death sentence to be reduced. The number of petitions with similar content exceeded 26,000. Although Wade became a social media sensation, a criminal is still a criminal. The deaths of Melton and Diana should not serve as a backdrop for Wade's infamy. Even Wade's biological father, Stephen, admitted that while he had considered helping his son escape, he ultimately realized that if the victims had been his mother, daughter, sister, or wife, he would never want anyone to do that for their murderer. Moreover, both victims were undoubtedly beloved individuals in someone's life. Faced with overwhelming evidence, Wade remained indifferent and cold, as if none of it concerned him. During his trial, he appeared in a neatly tailored suit with well-groomed hair, sitting arrogantly in his seat without the slightest sign of remorse. He even made a calm statement. "I'm not a monster nor a saint. Of course, I've made bad decisions, but who hasn't?" By June 2024, after nearly 5 years of proceedings, the case finally went to trial. In court, the judge summoned witnesses and presented crucial evidence, including recorded phone calls, DNA test reports, and surveillance footage. After hours of deliberation, the jury voted to sentence Wade to death for the 2 murders. His other charges, including theft and violent assault, were also tried and sentenced accordingly. At 4:30 p.m. on August 27, 2024, the judge officially sentenced Wade Wilson to death for the murders of Kristen Melton and Diana. The final ruling was as follows: 2 death sentences for the murders of Kristen Melton and Diana, 5 years in prison for car theft, days for the assault on Melissa, years for burglary, days for petty theft. All sentences would be served concurrently, with credit given for time already served. When the final verdict was announced, the victims' families could no longer hold back their emotions. Some broke down in tears upon hearing the ruling. They had waited far too long to witness justice. Though the murderer had been punished, the wounds in their hearts would never fully heal.
Referred to as the angels in white, doctors and nurses have a sacred mission to help people escape from disasters and illness. They are held in high regard and occupy a respected position in society. However, whenever you see something too beautiful, remember to keep your gaze fixed there. Sometimes, if you get too close, you'll realize that beneath the pure and beautiful exterior, there are hidden things that are not so pleasant. This is the message I wish to share with you through today's story. Voltrud Wagner was born in 1960 into a poor family in rural Austria. She was the eldest of many siblings. Her parents worked tirelessly outside the home, leaving Voltrud to manage everything at home, from caring for her younger siblings to looking after her grandmother, who was bedridden with a persistent fever. At just 12 years old, Voltrud was forced by circumstances to grow up quickly, taking on responsibilities far beyond her years. Despite facing numerous hardships and a life full of scarcity, she discovered that taking care of others, especially her younger siblings and her sick grandmother, gave her a sense of purpose. This experience led her to decide that she would become a nurse one day. However, her path was not easy. Voltrud struggled with her studies and, at first, was not accepted in a primary school due to her academic difficulties. At 22, she faced another setback when she failed her nursing entrance exam. Despite this, she refused to give up on her dream. Undeterred, Voltrud moved to Vienna, hoping to find work there. But her lack of formal qualifications and work experience made it difficult. No hospital was willing to hire her. Just as she was about to give up, a renowned hospital took her on as a nursing assistant. Though it was not the ideal role she had hoped for, Voltrud was overjoyed to finally be working in the medical field, bringing her one step closer to her dream. This hospital was Land's General Hospital, the 4th largest medical facility in Austria. It specialized in treating elderly patients or those with chronic illnesses, and the average patient age was over 70. Despite its size, the hospital had a higher-than-average mortality rate compared to others. Many elderly patients had mobility issues, requiring constant care from nurses. As a result, the workload for the nursing staff, especially assistants, was much heavier than in other hospitals. In addition to the daily tasks, when a patient passed away, the nursing assistants were responsible for cleaning the bed, as the body would release waste once brain function ceased. There were also emergencies, and when doctors were too busy, nursing assistants had the authority to manage prescriptions or even prescribe treatment for simple conditions. One particular department, the internal medicine department was never allowed to refuse new patients. As a result, it was always overcrowded and short-staffed, making it a department many preferred not to be assigned to. This was where Voltrud ended up. She was assigned to the night shift due to her previous experience caring for the elderly and her willingness to endure hardship. Voltrud adapted quickly, and her excellent skills and hardworking nature were praised by the hospital director. Over time, Voltrud became so immersed in her work that the hospital felt like her second home. She no longer had time for herself, instead focusing all her energy on caring for difficult and demanding elderly patients. Slowly, her passion for the job began to fade. Voltrud started questioning whether this challenging job was truly what she had always wanted. As the days passed, her doubts grew stronger, and she began to wonder if she had chosen the right path. One night in 1983, an event occurred that would mark a turning point for both Wagner and Lands General Hospital. That evening, Wagner, exhausted after finishing her night shift duties, was lying down to rest. Suddenly, the silence of the night was broken by the sound of a bell. Wagner immediately rushed to the source of the sound, only to find an elderly woman writhing in pain. This scene was all too familiar to her. The elderly woman grabbed Wagner's hand and began crying uncontrollably. Seeing this, Wagner's heart tightened. She wanted to help but felt utterly helpless, unable to do anything. After a few moments of panic, Wagner suddenly thought of a bold solution: using morphine. Morphine, a powerful drug that suppresses the nervous system, was often misused by criminals for illicit activities. However, when administered in the correct dose at the right time, it could be a highly effective painkiller. Yet, if administered in excess, it could be deadly, particularly for elderly patients with fragile health. In the end, Wagner made the decision to inject the elderly woman with morphine. The liquid slowly entered the vein. The woman's expression began to soften, and she appeared to feel more comfortable. But then, something terrifying happened. The woman's body grew stiff and immobile. Wagner had administered an overdose of morphine. The elderly patient could not endure the dosage and passed away. When Wagner realized what she had done, she was struck with overwhelming panic. She checked the woman's pulse. There was none. It was in that moment that Wagner truly understood that she had caused the death of a person. A wave of fear rushed through her, and the world around her seemed to crumble, even though the elderly woman had been the one to beg for the injection. After a few moments of panic, Wagner managed to regain some composure, though a strange and unsettling excitement began to stir within her. She realized that she had taken control of the woman's fate, and for the first time, she felt the power of deciding life and death. The next day, Wagner lied about the cause of the woman's death, claiming she had suffered a stroke in the night and passed away. She cleverly fabricated an alibi for the time of the woman's death, and due to her popularity at the hospital, no one questioned her version of events. In truth, it would have been easy to uncover the lie. A blood test, with the technical knowledge available at the time, would easily reveal an overdose of morphine. However, the hospital director dismissed the death as a normal occurrence for an elderly patient and didn't investigate further. Realizing that she wouldn't face any consequences for her actions, Wagner seemed to transform into someone else entirely. Her heart began to darken, a transformation so gradual that even she didn't recognize it. The sensation of having control over life and death began to consume the last remnants of her humanity. From that moment on, Wagner repeatedly used the same method to help elderly patients peacefully pass away. She slowly began to crave more. She wanted a group of like-minded individuals who shared her twisted ideals. Since childhood, Wagner had developed strong leadership abilities, and her natural charm made it easy for her to converse with anyone. Years after the incident, Wagner began to recruit members for her secret group. 3 people joined her cause. The first was Maria Gruber, a 19-year-old nursing student who had dropped out of school and started working as a nursing assistant on the night shift. When Maria first met Wagner and heard her plan, she thought it was madness and refused to join. However, Wagner persisted, sweet-talking her and claiming that they would both benefit from the arrangement. Not only would they ease the patient's pain, but they could also lighten their own workloads. After several conversations and repeated persuasion, Maria finally agreed to join, even idolizing Wagner. The second recruit was Irene Liedolf, a 21-year-old woman who had suffered constant abuse from her husband shortly after their marriage. Tired of facing the painful reality at home, she no longer had any reason to refuse Wagner's offer. Under Wagner's persuasion, Irene also agreed to join the group. The third member of the group was Stephanie Meyer, a 43-year-old nurse who worked the night shift and enjoyed making friends with younger people like Wagner and the others. Through Wagner's friendly nature, they gradually became close friends. The four of them shared several common traits. They were all nursing assistants, worked the night shift, and worked in the same ward. They frequently complained about their jobs. Under Wagner's leadership, the group formed a clique called the Sisters of Death. Wagner began brainwashing the three women, convincing them that all the wrongdoings they were committing were simply to end the suffering of patients and lighten their own workloads. She carefully guided them on how to administer morphine and the correct dosages, teaching them how to quietly ease patients' deaths. Since some of the women were already nursing assistants, they quickly grasped the necessary knowledge and became complicit in their crimes. Their targets were primarily elderly patients with terminal illnesses. Typically, they would only commit these acts once every few months, so no one suspected anything unusual about the deaths. Over time, however, the frequency of their killings increased dramatically, and they started to kill one person a month. Their targets expanded from only terminal patients to difficult and troublesome ones as well. As the killings became more frequent, the drugs they used also broadened. They no longer limited themselves to morphine. They began using insulin and flunitrazepam for their horrific purpose. These were drugs commonly used in patient care, which made them less noticeable. Misuse of these medications could lead to serious complications, ultimately resulting in death. The cause of death would only be detected through a blood test, but the women took careful steps to avoid detection. For a time, no one at the hospital paid attention to the unusual number of deaths. On the side of Wagner's group, all four women began to grow bored and tired of using the same drugs, and the cost of the medications was rising. They knew that eventually, someone would start noticing the pattern. Finally, Wagner devised a new method. The three women would divide the tasks and cooperate. One would pin the patient's head down and pinch their nose, forcing them to breathe through their mouth. Another would hold the patient's lower jaw and pour water into their mouth. The patient would have to swallow, otherwise the water would enter the lungs. The result was either drowning or water intoxication. Water intoxication occurred when a large amount of water was consumed in a short period, leading to an electrolyte imbalance and eventually suffocation and death. Fluid buildup in the lungs of elderly patients was not uncommon, so the hospital would not think it unusual. The four women began their grim work together. One person was in charge of watching the patient, while the other would pour the water. Any minor complaints, such as snoring, needing to urinate at night, or even pressing the call bell, would irritate them and be seen as a reason to bring about the patient's death. The number of patients in the hospital started to decline, and the workload of the women seemed to ease. Over the next 5 years, no one could pinpoint exactly when it started, but the hospital's mortality rate had become alarmingly high. Most of the deaths occurred at night. Families of patients began to grow concerned, and rumors started spreading. Some members of Wagner's group even began to question whether something was wrong with their actions. The public began circulating rumors that there was a serial killer operating in the hospital, specifically targeting elderly patients. This caused a wave of panic among the remaining patients, and the hospital came to be known as the Death Hall. The rumors spread quickly, and one day, a doctor realized that the frequent deaths were all among the patients who had been under the care of Wagner's group. He reported his suspicions to the authorities, and the police launched an investigation, planning to raid the hospital at night while the group was working. However, when the police began their investigation, the hospital director did everything in his power to obstruct them, insisting that there was nothing wrong and that the rumors were false. After narrowly escaping detection, Wagner and the others became even more ruthless. No one was able to uncover the truth about what had happened in that cursed hospital. After their shifts, Wagner and her group had no purpose other than drinking, partying, and shopping, fully embracing their newfound depravity. In February 1989, After a few drinks with the group, Wagner loudly complained about a patient who had called her a bitch, saying that the patient had gotten what they deserved. She even went so far as to detail the crime she had committed. Unbeknownst to her, a nearby doctor overheard her conversation. He had recently learned that 2 patients had experienced a sudden drop in their blood sugar levels after being admitted to the hospital. Tests revealed that they had been injected with large doses of insulin, clearly administered by someone. What Wagner had confessed matched the doctor's observations exactly. Without hesitation, the doctor rushed out of the bar and went straight to the nearest police station to report the incident. Given the abnormally high mortality rate at the hospital, an official investigation was launched. In the following 2 months, the police worked tirelessly to uncover the truth. Forensic teams even had to exhume the bodies of deceased patients for further investigation. Autopsies revealed that between 1983 and 1987, nearly 20,500 vials of flunitrazepam had been consumed, 7 times the normal amount, and the death rate of patients was 5 times higher during Wagner's shifts. With overwhelming evidence in hand, the Sisters of Death were arrested on April 7, 1989. They confessed to their crimes without any remorse. The police deliberately kept the 4 women in custody during the interrogation. The investigation revealed that the group had committed a total of 49 murders, with Wagner as the mastermind. She admitted to carrying out 39 of the murders herself, but some believe that the actual death toll could be as high as 300, with many deaths going undetected. The number 49, they felt, was far too low. When the case was widely reported, the brutality of Wagner and her group shocked the entire country. In an era of peace and prosperity, it was truly appalling that such a heinous crime had occurred in one of the country's largest hospitals. Austrian Chancellor Franz Vranitzky at the time called it the most horrific and gruesome crime in Austria's history. However, after several appeals, some of the murder charges were dropped because many of the victims survived the initial attempt on their lives, only to succumb to other illnesses later the same day. In the end, Wagner was convicted of 17 counts of intentional murder and 2 counts of assault on patients, receiving a life sentence. Irene was convicted of 5 murders and also sentenced to life in prison. Stefania, who was considered to have been more coerced, received a lesser sentence of 20 years for manslaughter and intentional killing. Maria, being the youngest, was sentenced to 15 years in prison. It is worth noting that, like most European countries, Austria had long abolished the death penalty. The maximum sentence was life imprisonment, but in practice, anyone who served more than 15 years could be eligible for parole if they met certain conditions. Stefania and Maria only served 12 years in prison before being released in 2003. 5 years later, Wagner and Irene, who had behaved well in prison, were also granted parole. Before their release, they were even given a shopping trip and a day at the hair salon to help them reintegrate into society. Amid the public outrage, they both changed their names and attempted to start anew. After the case concluded, many wondered how such horrific events could have occurred in a large public hospital. Clearly, there were serious issues within the institution, and the leadership had never investigated the underlying causes of the high death rate. Following the scandal, those in charge of the hospital were dismissed, and the hospital had to change its name to distance itself from the dark chapter. Wagner, who had once been a gentle and kind-hearted girl, had gradually become twisted, leading her to commit unimaginable crimes. It was truly tragic to see the life of such a young woman unravel in such a horrific way. And so, this is the story of the serial killers and their sentences. What are your thoughts on this case? Please leave your comments below the video, and don't forget to support us by liking the video and subscribing to the channel. See you in the next video.